When I think of judgment, I think of holding on to a story of how we think life should be, or how other people should behave, or how we should have done things. And the word should, if you've ever studied NVC, nonviolent communication, the word should is quite hostile. And it creates this blueprint that we have in our minds of how life's supposed to turn out. And every time it turns out differently, we judge it as bad, wrong, or somehow subpar to the ideal we have in our heads. And a lot of that applies to people's behavior and how we think they should respond to circumstances in their lives. And I think the greatest lesson I learned was when I was a Holocaust docent. I went to school to learn about World War II so I can turn around and teach high school kids about it. But I think more importantly than meeting with survivors, or perhaps equally as important, was to sit down with what are now members of the KKK and understand what got them to where they are. Not for the sake of condemning them or telling them that they're wrong or proving them wrong, but to just understand, how did you end up where you are? And when you hear the story of a young boy who struggled so much to fit in as a kid and was bullied in the playground and had a really terrible, violent home life and just needed a place to fit in and was so desperate to just not fight internally anymore and just find a place to call home. And then he's approached by their brotherhood, as they call themselves, and they welcome him in as one of them. And he finally has this love, this place that embraces him, which is all he really wants. And you can kind of understand how one day he can be so close to suicide and giving up because the whole world feels against him, and then being embraced by this brotherhood, why that sounds so welcoming. And it's interesting for these groups to almost always need to have an enemy figure because it creates cohesion within the group. It gives everybody in the group something to be against. And so immediately I stepped away from judgment and thinking that these people are less than me, and actually being able to relate their childhood with my childhood and just realize that we've made just different choices that have led us to where we are. And so letting go of judgment is this beautiful heart-opening exercise that I've had to deal with in my own life. When I was in high school, it was my last year of high school, I found out that my girlfriend was pregnant. And it wasn't because we were being careless. She was epileptic, and the pills she was taking for epilepsy were Tegretol, which canceled out the birth control pills. And the doctors didn't know it at the time. And condoms don't always work. And we learned the very important lesson, albeit too late, that if you're not ready to do the deed, then, if you're not ready for the consequences, you're not ready to do the deed. So she was in this really interesting situation because she was very pro-life up to that moment. And then she found herself pregnant with the medical decision to make that she can't keep the child and stay on the pills. So the Tegretol pills. So it was this really interesting situation where it was a very difficult decision to make, and it was only made more difficult by the people outside the clinic who were calling her a murderer, as if the day wasn't hard enough already. And so I think it's important for us to not make any judgments about a situation we haven't even been in ourselves yet, and definitely not make any judgments about somebody else's situation, because everyone is battling their own demons that we know absolutely nothing about.